it wasn't till I got towards the end of medical school, really into residency, I'm like, man, I kind of just dive into one area a little too much.
Same.
I needed to be more, I realized I needed to be more rounded, find some more hobbies, do some things outside of work or school and just grow.
Yeah.
And it took me a while to realize that. I was too one-tracked.
Welcome to Under the Knife, the podcast where we cut into topics such as politics, life advice, and medicine, and we do this with the precision of a licensed orthopedic surgeon. I'm your host, Dr. Craig Green, an orthopedic surgeon and elected public official. Chip, thanks for being on Under the Knife.
Wow, I feel honored.
Yeah. So, you're my first colleague to be on, and this is where we dissect life.
Okay.
Which might be medicine, it might be politics.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what we were going to get ourselves into. I just came with an open slate.
Yeah.
Let's go.
We want to talk about Chip.
Okay, wow.
So,
all right. I try not to do that much. I'm usually one to try to skirt around.
And you're good at that. You're good at turning it around to get people talking about themselves.
Okay.
So today we're going to talk about you.
Okay, great.
So you and I have known each other for over 30 years.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
you
right.
haven't aged, though.
All of a sudden my kids come and my hair starts turning white. Yeah.
So let's see. Were our dads in the state senate the same 91 to 99?
Yeah, I think it was 89. I think that's when they started.
Yeah.
It was maybe. I think
my dad won in 91.
It was 87.
Okay.
My dad's I think was 87 or 88.
To
somewhere around there. He had
probably.
2 terms until 90. He went from 90 all the way to 95.
Okay. So they were in one term together.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think they sat next to each other, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
And that's where you and were you his aide?
I was one of his student workers.
Okay.
I was in high school.
Yeah.
I knew the aides. I helped with the aides. I was probably the one they were like, just get out of the way, kid.
I remember he would say, okay, sit here. And it was, whether it was Tommy Casanova or somebody, sometimes Jay Darden or your dad, just vote with them. Whatever they do, just press that button.
Yeah,
I don't know
right.
if they can still do that.
That's
right. While they went to the
right.
restroom or something the whole time.
I learned a lot from the aides as well in my time down at the legislature.
And then I got to be a head page.
Okay.
That was a little different pace.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Did you ever?
I never did that. I had some of my father's friends of ours. We set up to do that job. I worked for, who was it? Fran and Ann. There was a fourth floor crew that I worked for when I was in kind of late high school or college. That was kind of the runners for bringing stuff up and down throughout the Capitol. And a really nice crew of ladies, but I never worked as a page. My dad employed a couple of people to become pages that then got married. I always hear about that. Luke and Katie Williamson, they always say, "Oh, your dad helped us out." We got page jobs through your dad, and then when we got introduced there and got married through that relationship.
So, and then take us through your athletic career in college.
Oh, I was a swimmer and soccer player in high school, and I kind of got to the point where I was. In my junior year of high school, I said, I broke my wrist. I made my friend take the blame for that, though, although it was my fault.
How'd you break it?
I was playing soccer. A friend threw in a ball. I made a terrible move on a throw-in, and I came down and fallen outstretched hand, and I broke my wrist, a little physeal injury. It's still growing at 16. And I broke my wrist, and at that point I said, if I'm going to try to continue to swim, it looked like I had maybe a little more talent in swimming than soccer, which wasn't much. I'm probably going to stop soccer, and I'm just going to try to focus on swimming. So that broken wrist was the last time I played organized soccer, and I just moved into swimming at that point.
However, but for a broken wrist, you may not have swam in college, right?
Correct. Yeah. I thought, all right, I think I want to swim in college. I hadn't just focused on just swimming, and so I got a few scholarships to go to some smaller schools, some Division I schools that were a little lesser in terms of talent. And my dad and family just kind of leaned on, like, why don't you stay here? And so I walked on to LSU. I was walk-on right here, baby. Walk-ons tend to turn it out to do great things.
I know. We got to tell Chad Loop that.
That's right. And so, walked on to LSU with very average talent, and I just really swum year-round, focusing just on swimming my senior year. And
what was your event?
I swam by the end of my college career. I was swimming breaststroke and individual medley, but I swam kind of a bunch of things because I would say I was very average. Mm-hmm. I was able to make SEC championships and score and help participate with the team, but I never went to NCAAs. Was never a national champion. I had friends that were national champions and were Olympic level swimmers. But, I gradually got better and better. But eventually you get to the point, even if you're getting, 22, nobody's, mature physically enough to say that they've reached their physical peak. But at 22, it was like, all right, swimming's done for you.
Right.
You're not going on to do this in law school or medical school or whatever.
But think about this. I think about this all the time. I walked on to LSU. I feel like I walked on to med school. I feel like I walked on to orthopedic. I mean, the grind that there is there pays off in other things, don't you?
Sure. I mean, when I went to medical school, the NCAA had a 20-hour work week limit, which I don't even know if that still exists or is followed. But, you were definitely at 20 hours or be a little bit beyond, and that was every week. And all of a sudden you stop doing that, and you're like, well, what do I do now? Well, I'm now going into medical school. Literally went from undergrad to LSU New Orleans, where again we crossed paths, and literally all of a sudden I have a day off. I have either have a day off of doing nothing, I guess, 20 hours a week now I have to fill, or I can just study. And so all of a sudden I had a lot of time to study, and it worked well for medical school. I could just kind of focus specifically on that one thing, and it wasn't till I got towards end of medical school, really into residency, I'm like, man, I kind of just dive into one area a little too much. Same. I needed to be more. I realized I needed to be more rounded. Find some more hobbies, do some things outside of work or school, and just grow. Yeah. And it took me a while to realize that I was too one-tracked.
What was your first hobby, and what's your current one?
Oh my gosh, I mean, I don't know if it's a hobby. I mean, you call parenting. You don't have a whole lot of opportunities for hobbies when you have three boys and that are running and active.
You're a GM for a second grade.
I would say Sean Cangelosi is the GM. I'm the assistant GM. Okay.
Quite a team.
I would say that involves three other great guys that are coaching with us. But so I'm doing a little bit of coaching. Yeah. I would say I try to play golf, but I would say it's pretty bad.
Same.
I still go out and do lessons, and then I'll stop for about a month. Love to fish.
I started enjoying golf a lot more when I just don't keep score.
Yes.
It's way better. Or play wolf.
And when my two older boys, 8 and 7, they go out. They can't play a full, 18 or 9 holes. Let's just go play 2 or 3 holes from 100 yards in. Did that about a week ago. I was like, all right, as long as they don't swing the clubs at each other, that's a win, and they have fun.
Well, I have 3 sons that play too, and I got them now where our Sunday is church lunch golf.
That's great.
We play 9 holes.
That's
we
great.
Play a wolf scramble.
Okay.
So it's 2-on-2, but it's different each hole.
Okay.
And it's a scramble. So
that's great, man.
It's awesome. Back to orthopedics. Let me ask you this. So, do you know Matt Graves? Do you know that name? He's
I don't think
he's
so.
Chairman of Jackson.
Okay.
The Mississippi program.
All right.
He and I were co-fellows in trauma.
Okay.
And
I remember the chairman that was there before him was a spine guy, and I'm not sure when Matt became chairman.
Yeah. Well, he just became chairman last year or two, but he was program director prior to that. And what's interesting is one day we were doing an AO course in San Diego or something, and we were supposed to go to dinner that night. And he goes, "I can't go. I've got these 300 applications I got to cull through, and I got to interview 30." And you know how it goes. There's 300 applicants, interview 30, and they take 3.
Yep.
And I said, "Well, how do you cut from 300 to 30?" And he didn't actually play sports. He said the first thing I looked through in these 300 applicants, all doctors, is did they play college athletics, even if they walked on. Because at a point in life where they could have chosen to do less, they chose to do more. And that's a character trait that I'm looking for in a resident.
That's great. I think that's a great thing to look at,
Worked for you, and I did.
I've been fortunate also. I mean, you may have had this. I've had a few of those people that I've employed. I've had a couple of college athletes that have come and worked with me either as medical assistants or student workers that have gone on to do other great things. Yeah. And it takes a lot of sacrifice, focus, and willing to go a little bit further than everybody else.
And I don't think you and I ever made $1 off of athletics.
No. I mean, I got maybe some free meals.
Steak night at Broussard Hall.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh, Broussard Hall. Wow.
Well, I want to shift gears right quick and take us to the day where you were the team doctor. You did sports medicine.
Yep.
And you're the team doctor for Denham Springs High School.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden you get a phone call.
Well, I'll take you further back. So, that was about 7 years in my practice, and I remember being on a beach with my wife, and we were at, I think, Orange Beach, and literally kind of come into a realization as I'm there. We had just had let's see, so we had 1 year old, maybe had less than a 1 year old too.
Yeah.
I mean, I may have had 2 kids at this time, and yes, I definitely had 2 kids at this time. So we had time on the beach. I was listening to myself. I was thinking, what's the next step? It's been 7 years of my practice. I feel like I'm ready for the next challenge. And, I tell people I thought this was going to be something like, all right, I'm going to start doing one procedure different. Maybe I'll start doing tennis elbow surgery arthroscopically, which was like, that was a big deal.
Yeah.
Some of my friends had told me that you should try that, and just trying to, I hate to say spice things up, but just a new kind of look at practice, and to try something different, something more challenging. And I thought it was going to be that.
Get ready.
And so I literally, that was me, God saying, all right, you're up for a challenge. Let's try this. And so, a week after that was probably in July or late July or early August. A week or 2 after that, I got a call. They had some physicians that were relieved from their duties at the Saints, and the fellow that was down there working as their director of sports medicine had worked with us at Brock, and worked at LSU Athletics, and I had a relationship with them, and they kind of they were in a bind. Mm-hmm. Nobody's normally looking for a team doctor 2 weeks into the preseason.
Right.
And so, they had a finite amount of time to find somebody.
Right.
They had to have certain credentials, which I had, and a training that I had, and kind of experience with the NFL, and the fact that I had worked with Dr. Andrews and worked with Bob Anderson and some people that kind of were second opinion doctors in the NFL, kind of led me to, for a very small group of people, to say, all right, well,
good fit.
You're a good fit. You got picked. And so, it was, man, it was.
You thought it was going to be tennis elbow surgery.
I thought it was going to be tennis elbow surgery. It was my challenge. And look, here it is.
What's interesting about that is there's a book, I don't know if you've heard of, it's called Disrupt Yourself.
Oh, yeah.
And it talks about the 7-year cycle, I should say. And that at the beginning of every 7 years, something disruptive probably happens. And if you think about it in our life, physiologically, like 7's different than 14, 21, 28. I just turned 49 this year. Like, and it might be something like, I thought it was going to be, maybe we get epic or something. But there's something that disrupts. And what happens is people, at first you don't change, but then there's a steep learning curve. And people think, oh, it's a steep learning curve, that's bad. No. That means you catch on quickly.
Yeah.
You don't want a shallow learning curve, right?
Yeah.
And then what happens when that tails off, one of 3 things, you think, I'm going back to the way it was, or you just stay there.
Yep.
Or it hits the beginning of another 7 years. So every 7 years, there's probably going to be something to disrupt your rhythm.
Yeah, you need that.
Yeah,
you need that. We've talked about that before. Is stagnant is not where you need to be. I think personally or professionally,
right.
You need to be growing in your faith relationship, your relationship with your spouse, your friends, your work. If you stay stagnant and you aren't changing or willing to be challenged or grow, you're going to have a hard time, I think, succeeding.
I think there's the analogy too of like the Dead Sea. It only receives and it's dead. There's nothing. It has to be flow through you to other people. And fortunately, you and I have a job where we can help people.
Yeah.
And that keeps us sharp too, because we get to pass that on.
Yeah. Look, we got a lot to pass on. We're fortunate to have this job. That's why I look at this as this is a blessing.
Right.
You think of how hard it is to get into medical school now, as well as hard it is to get into residency. And
good thing we did it when we did.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
I think about life too sometimes. And I think there are multiple things that I've done that was the hardest thing I've ever done. And I'm grateful every day that I did it. And I could not do it again if I tried right now.
Sure. I mean, I think of going into residency as well as athletics. I mean, you kind of have to be a little bit of a sadist. You got to be willing to take some abuse and be accepting of that.
Right.
I think that's one of the things is my wife and I sometimes talk about. We got to teach our children to suffer well.
Yeah.
I mean, life ain't going to be easy all the time, and you have to be able to suffer well with a happy heart, and thankful.
Yep.
And if you can't suffer well, medicine ain't your world.
Nope.
Especially surgical residency.
Well, how about that too? I mean, you have to suffer well in order to help people.
Yeah,
heal.
that's right.
Isn't that crazy?
That's right.
I've recently been exposed to these 7 questions whenever I'm in a bad mindset, and it's really started helping me. Because, throughout our training, it's 10 years, you could get into a bad space.
Sure. Yeah.
And I started saying, okay, someone share with me. It's not mine, but they work real well. I'll share them with you. What am I thinking? Was the first one. Like my dad's ill right now, so you could start thinking why, this and that, the other. What are you thinking? What am I feeling? Can you actually put words to what you're feeling? Number 3, what's the truth? Number 4, which you just hit on is really good, is what am I grateful for?
Yeah.
That, I think, can change the personality of any kind of decision that you're making.
Sure.
Number 5 is what am I hopeful for? What can we hope? Because you get in a bad place, you start, what is that saying? That more joy is lost in imagination than in reality.
Sure.
So what am I actually hopeful for? And number 6 is what is this whole reflection taught me about myself? What was my takeaway here? And probably number 7, which you also mentioned, not being stagnant, is what's my next step? Or what's my next move on the chessboard? Distance equals rate times time. So you got to be moving. And if you get the direction right, then just do one foot in front of the other. You look up 10 years later and you're a full-fledged orthopedic surgeon or so. But there's other things that the parenting maybe.
Yeah. I would say that, we were sitting around at a dinner table last night with some friends, and we all sat around and asked, hey, this is Christmas. Let's think about what we're grateful for and what we're hopeful for in 2024. And I think it's important to be reflective of that. And I would also just say, I'm in a better spiritual world than I am now than I was probably 5 or 10 years ago. And
what do you equate that to?
I think a lot of it has to do with, he was with me even though I wasn't with him, understanding that. And I also think it had a lot to do with my wife and but beginning a faith journey and then just diving in.
Yeah.
And I would say that, people listen around and pray and they hope to hear some loud resounding gong, and it's usually a whisper.
Yeah.
It's usually something quiet, trying to find direction and being reflective of that. And I think it's not always something that's blatant.
Right.
Sometimes you get hit over the head and the saint's job falls in your lap.
Right.
But
oftentimes it's a whisper.
Oftentimes it's a whisper. And so,
I'm reminded of, I think Dan Rather interviewed Mother Teresa.
Yeah.
And he said, so when you pray, you talk to God? And she said, yes. And he said, well, does he talk back? And she said, yes. And he said, well, what does he say? And she said, nothing. And if you don't understand that, then I can't explain it to you.
Yeah.
But if you can hear God's saying nothing, then you can hear him when he says something.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Saint Mother Teresa had a lot of great sayings.
She sure did.
Yeah. And I would just say that I think taking a step back in moments, you ask your 7 questions and reflecting. I think we sometimes kind of react too quickly. It can be being angry with your kids or some moment of, I'm really upset in my work. Man, it's hard to stop and reflect and be kind of a little bit more hesitant before you make your next step. Because thinking it out is not something you learn at 22.
No.
You're a young, stupid male, regardless of how smart you are.
Right.
You don't have experience. We've talked about that.
Good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment.
Yeah. Yeah. Be willing to fail.
Yeah. I've gotten where too, parenting, I have a lot of children. I want them to fail under my roof.
Sure. Yeah. You need that. If you don't, in having them understand failure, I think athletics helps that.
Yeah.
Can't be successful in everything. It's hard to be that person. And if you can't accept some failure and growth, that's going to have a hard time in life.
Let me ask you this. So I had a hard time getting right out, and I'm a little bit older than you. I remember I was a 4th-year student when you were a freshman.
Yep.
But, I read a book once called The True Measure of a Man, and it's in Western civilization, we don't have a determination of manhood necessarily, like a bar mitzvah or something, like other cultures do. And so there's a default, and when you're early on, it's sports, and then I think it's heavily weighted towards can you get women? And then eventually it's how much money do you make? And I've heard that that's why we idolize professional athletes, is because they have all three. And what I'm trying to teach my young men is what it takes to be a man. And a lot of times what I'm getting to is, our whole life from college, really from age 4 to the end of residency, there was a number that could tell you how well you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting when you get out and practice, there's no measure.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not how much money you make. It's not how many patients you see. So how do you gauge well done?
Well, I mean,
do you understand what I'm saying? Like, we don't get
absolutely. We don't get like, this is an 85. You should have done better on this patient's clinic visit.
Right.
They
will talk bad about you on social media if you do.
Yeah, I know. And I start with, try to do your best. Think of what would your parents want, or what would you want to offer your family members. And if you can walk out and say, I think this is what I would have given my family members the same thing, or talked about it. I feel like it's on an individual patient basis, you can do that. I do think that I kind of lean back to one of my mentors told me, look, you're never as bad as your worst critic or as good as your biggest fan.
Yeah.
So when people are blowing smoke up your ass,
mm-hmm.
Don't listen to that shit.
Stick. Yeah.
Don't listen to that. I mean, because excuse me, as a
fine.
But don't believe it, because I think some people fall into this issue where they just hear it and they believe
mm-hmm.
it, and they have all these people around them, and money can allow that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
You're the greatest thing, blah 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 blah, and it just, in order to turn those people off, it's hard when you got a lot around.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you have to you're somewhere in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
You're not as bad as your biggest critic, or as great as your biggest fan.
I had that a few weeks ago in politics, because some people in Lafayette were very upset about their water bill. So I called a town hall, and 300 people who really hate Craig Green showed up. And I just took it.
Yeah.
And then a couple nights later, I had a fundraiser. And granted, there were only 30 that really liked Craig Green.
Yeah.
But it was the two ends of the spectrum, right? And
Sure.
I remember what Danny Werfel told me once. He said, Craig, just don't ever believe what people write about you, whether it's really, really good or really, really bad.
Yeah. I mean, I'd also, I hate to say this, I don't watch the news.
Mm-mm.
I don't really read the paper. I stopped listening to radio, like radio, like sports talk radio, even though I love some of the sports talk radio people. I just started kind of turning off the noise.
Right.
And I think
that helped clear your mind.
Man, it really did. That happened about 2 years ago, and I just really dove into other things to grow and to kind of help me, mainly in my faith journey. Yeah. Look, I would say this Bible in a Year podcast I did, you and I talked, you gave me a Bible in a year as well. I mean, a Bible in a Year podcast from 2022 was the year of my podcast, and it was boom. And then the Catholic Catechism in a Year is what I'm in right now, which has been excellent. I mean, just really, really diving into that. And I think moving out some of the noise of life can help.
Did I share with you that I took a 1-year Bible for each of my children?
Yes,
personalized.
that's great. That's great.
It was fun.
And then somebody lost one, right?
Yeah. And so they came to me and said, Dad, I lost it. Can you do another one? And I thought, at first I was upset, and I was like, first of all, it keeps me reading the Bible. And secondly, my child is asking me to personalize another Bible to him. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Man, and the great thing about faith journey and also medical practice, they're unending. No. This is not like we arrive at a destination.
Yes.
It's just, let's get up and grow.
That's right. I mean, I thought before taking my first steps, I was like, all right, I've got enough knowledge that I can help. I know what I'm talking about. No, you don't know that. Mm-mm. There is not an endpoint in either.
So you may have visited with my friend Rob, the guy that's in private equity. Mm-hmm. He introduced me to centering prayer, which is it's a Catholic thing, really. Christian meditation, but he started it like 2 years ahead of me. And oftentimes what I found is you don't learn from gurus. You just learn from somebody who's a step or two ahead of you on the path. Right?
Sure.
And they're like, hey, watch, there's a pothole here, or step here. There's good footing here,
Yeah.
in the journey.
That's right. That's right.
To keep it fresh, you have to be also, I've heard people say everybody should have a Paul, a Barnabas, and a Timothy. Somebody you learn from, somebody you learn with, and somebody you learn to.
Yes. Yes,
and
that's
it
great.
keeps you going,
That's great.
Well, look, thank you for being on Under the Knife. This was exactly what we had in mind. We dissect life.
Oh, wow.
Just like we dissect
I feel like
humans.
we could go on for hours here, Craig. We could do this, but
I know.
we've got other stuff to do.
Well, come back sometime, would you?
All right, deal.
We have a lot more to talk about.
Excellent.
Hey,
Love
where
it.
can people find you? By the way, you're LSU team doctor now.
I'm LSU team doctor. You can find me at Brock, just like you.
Yeah.
And, today at Sportsplex and a basketball game as an assistant GM. So.
Well, listen, I can say we do have a little overlap, but I would let you do my surgery. So you're
I
an
appreciate
excellent surgeon,
that, brother.
excellent
I appreciate
human.
it, man.
And,
I appreciate it. I really enjoy having you as a partner. And, there's so many of us, you don't get to see everybody, but I get to see you pretty regularly.
Yeah.
So
and we went from talking about what do you do for this surgery to faith and life and
I
kids.
know that's what it's about, man.
So, press on.
That's right. Press on, brother.
All right, brother.
Excellent.
Take care.
Excellent.
Thank you for joining us today, and a big thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in to this surgical exploration of politics, healthcare, and life. I've been your host, Dr. Craig Green. Remember to stay informed, stay sharp, and join us next time to see which of life's topics we'll dissect under the knife.